"That old Jeep is pure junk." The words echoed across the parking lot of Desert Thunder Off-Road Park in Moab, Utah, a sprawling compound of red rock trails, obstacle courses, and mud pits where off-road enthusiasts gathered every weekend to test their heavily modified trucks, buggies, and SUVs against some of the most challenging terrain in the American Southwest. The declaration came from a guy named Brad Hutchinson, mid-30s, wearing a Monster Energy hat, Oakley sunglasses, and a t-shirt. From his sponsor, Hutchinson Performance, a shop in Phoenix that built custom rock crawlers for clients with six-figure budgets. Brad was standing next to his pride and joy, a 2023 Jeep Gladiator Rubicon that had been completely rebuilt with $85,000 in modifications. Long travel suspension with king coilovers, 40-inch BF Goodrich tires on beadlock wheels, full tube chassis reinforcement, LS3 V8 engine swap producing 450 horsepower, custom front and rear axles with ARB lockers, chromoly drive, shafts, hydraulic steering, and enough LED lights to illuminate a football field. The truck was painted electric blue, with sponsor decals covering every panel, and it sat tall enough that you needed a stepladder to reach the driver's seat. This machine had won multiple rock crawling competitions, had been featured in magazines, had an Instagram account with 80,000 followers. It was the kind of build that made other off-roaders either envious or intimidated. The target of Brad's mockery was a vehicle that looked like it had been pulled from a junkyard and barely made roadworthy. A 1987 Jeep Wrangler YJ, the square headlight generation that off-road purists either loved for its simplicity or dismissed as outdated. This particular Wrangler was primer gray with rust patches eating through the fenders. One headlight cracked, a soft top so faded and torn it was basically decorative, mismatched doors that didn't quite align, and paint peeling like sunburned skin. The tires were worn street tires, not even all-terrains, just cheap highway rubber with barely legal tread. The bumpers were bent and dented. The interior, visible through the torn soft top, showed duct-taped seats and a dashboard held together with zip ties. By every visual metric, this Jeep looked like it should be parked behind someone's barn, waiting to be sold for scrap metal, not sitting in the staging area of one of America's premier off-road parks alongside $100,000 custom builds. The Jeep's owner was Sarah Collins, 38 years old, wearing faded Carhartt work pants, a grease-stained t-shirt and work boots that had seen better decades. She'd driven this Jeep from her small garage in rural Texas, 18 hours straight through New Mexico, Colorado, and into Utah, to compete in Desert Thunder's annual Run What You Brung competition, an event where anyone with any vehicle could attempt the park's expert-level trail system and compete for fastest times. Most competitors brought heavily modified rigs, built specifically for rock crawling. Sarah had brought what looked like a $500 Craigslist special. She was standing next to her Jeep with a calm expression, arms crossed, not responding to Brad's commentary, even though he was loud enough for the 50-plus spectators and competitors in the staging area to hear. Brad walked over, circling Sarah's Jeep like a shark examining wounded prey, his phone out, filming for his Instagram story. "Seriously, what is this? Did you drive this off the set of a post-apocalypse movie? Look at this rust I can literally see through the fender. And street tires on a rock-crawling course?" He zoomed his camera in on the worn tires, the rusted body panels, the duct-taped interior. "Lady, I don't mean to be rude, but you're going to destroy this thing on the first obstacle. Hell, you probably won't even make it up the initial climb. This is embarrassing. You should honestly just turn around and go home before you hurt yourself or damage the trails." Several people in the crowd laughed. A few others looked uncomfortable, recognizing that Brad was being unnecessarily harsh. Most just watched, curious about how Sarah would respond. Sarah looked at Brad calmly, no anger or defensiveness in her expression. "You done?" Brad smirked. "Yeah, I'm done, just trying to save you some embarrassment. But hey, if you want to prove me right on camera, be my guest. I'll even give you a head start." Sarah reached into her Jeep and pulled out a beat-up clipboard with the registration paperwork for the competition. She handed it to the event coordinator standing nearby. "Sarah Collins, entry confirmed. I'm running in the expert class, same as him." She pointed at Brad. The coordinator, a woman named Jessica Martinez who'd been organizing off-road events for 15 years, looked at Sarah with concern. "Ma'am, I have to warn you. The expert course includes vertical rock faces, 45-degree inclines, narrow shelf roads with 1,000-foot drop-offs. We've had $100,000 buggies get damaged. Are you sure you want to run that Jeep on Expert? Sarah nodded. I'm sure. Jessica shrugged, marked Sarah's entry, and handed her a timing transponder to mount on the Jeep. Your call. Good luck. You're in heat, 30 minutes. Sarah took the transponder and walked back to her Jeep. Brad was still filming, narrating to his phone. Guys, this is going to be hilarious. Some random lady with a junk Jeep thinks she can run Expert. I'm calling. Fed now she doesn't finish. Probably breaks an axle on the first rock garden. But hey, at least it'll be entertaining. He posted the video to Instagram with the caption, When you show up to Expert class with a $500 Walmart special, this won't end well. Duck rock crawling, juck or desert thunder, juck yikes. The post immediately started getting comments. Most were laughing emojis and jokes about the Jeep's appearance. A few defended Sarah, saying you shouldn't judge capability by looks. Most just waited to see what would happen. Before we go further, I want to ask, where are you watching from, US, another country? Drop a comment and let me know. And tell me, have you ever shown up somewhere and been completely underestimated because of how you looked or what you drove? How did that feel? Let's build a community that judges capability, not appearance. Sarah walked around to the front of her Jeep and popped the hood. The sound of the latch releasing was surprisingly solid, not the creaking, rusted sound you'd expect from a vehicle that looked this rough. She propped the hood open with the support rod, and several people nearby who'd been half watching out of curiosity walked over to look. What they saw didn't match the exterior at all. Under the hood sat an engine that looked like it belonged in a completely different vehicle, or maybe a different planet. The engine bay was immaculate. Every surface was clean, every wire labeled and zip-tied perfectly, every component either new or meticulously maintained. But it was the engine itself that stopped people mid-conversation. It wasn't the stock 4.2-liter inline-six that came in 1987 Wranglers, an engine known for being reliable but underpowered, producing maybe 112 horsepower when new. This was a modern LS3 V8 from a Corvette, 6.2 liters, topped with a custom intake manifold and what looked like a supercharger, specifically a Magnuson TVS 2300 unit with intercooler. The engine was painted matte black, the supercharger polished aluminum, and everything was mounted so cleanly it looked like factory installation. Custom headers ran down into a full stainless steel exhaust system. The cooling system featured an aluminum radiator and dual electric fans. A high-output alternator and custom battery setup suggested serious electrical demands. The transmission looked like a modern 6-speed manual, probably a Tremec Magnum, known for handling serious torque. Custom motor mounts, upgraded engine computer, professional wiring harness. This wasn't a backyard bolt-together job. This was professional-grade work. Sarah stood next to the open hood, watching as people's expressions changed from mockery to confusion to recognition. One guy, a serious off-roader in his 50s who'd been building custom rigs for decades, walked up and just stared. Is that a supercharged LS3? Sarah nodded. 6.2-liter, Magnuson 2300, making about 640 horsepower and 610 lb-ft of torque. Custom tuned on a dyno for low-end torque and throttle response. The guy's mouth opened slightly. In a YJ Wrangler? Yes, sir. What about the drivetrain? Stock axles would explode with that power. Sarah smiled slightly. Atlas 4.3.1 transfer case, full chromoly output shafts. Front axle is a Dana 60 with ARB locker, 5.13 gears, chromoly shafts. Rear is a 14-bolt with Detroit locker, same gears, also chromoly. 4-link suspension front and rear with Fox coilovers, 14 inches of travel. Hydraulic steering. Full roll cage, 5-point harnesses. Weighs 3 to 200 pounds, about 800 pounds lighter than stock because I pulled all the interior. Sound deadening, anything not essential. Power-to-weight ratio is stupid. The older guy just started laughing, not mockingly, but in genuine appreciation. You sandbagged them. You built a monster and made it look like junk on purpose. Sarah shrugged. I like surprising people. Word spread quickly through the staging area. Within 5 minutes, 30 people were crowded around Sarah's Jeep, looking at the engine, asking questions, taking photos. Brad Hutchinson pushed through the crowd, his earlier smirk fading as he saw what was under the hood. What the hell? That's a supercharged LS. Sarah closed the hood carefully. Yep. But it's still just a junk Jeep, right? Pure trash that probably won't make it past the first obstacle. Brad's face flushed. He'd just publicly mocked a build that was objectively more powerful than his own. His Gladiator made 450 horsepower. This destroyed YJ made 640. His weighed 5,400 pounds. Hers weighed 3,200. She had better power-to-weight, comparable suspension, and the element of surprise. Brad tried to recover. Power doesn't mean skill. You still have to drive it. Let's see if you can actually wheel, or if you just bought an expensive engine. Sarah met his eyes. You're right. Power means nothing without skill. Guess we'll find out in about 20 minutes. She turned and walked toward the driver's meeting, leaving Brad standing there looking, significantly less confident than he had 10 minutes ago. The expert course at Desert Thunder was legendary. 3 miles of the most technical terrain in Utah. Vertical rock faces requiring precise tire placement. Off-camber sections where one wrong move meant rolling your vehicle down a cliff. Ledges tall enough that you had to bounce the suspension to get tires over. Loose shale sections where traction disappeared. And a final obstacle nicknamed the Widowmaker, a nearly vertical rock face with minimal grip that had broken multiple $100,000 competition buggies. Most runs took 45-60 minutes, if you completed it at all. Breakage was common. Rollovers happened. This wasn't recreational wheeling. This was expert-level technical driving that required precise throttle control, understanding of suspension dynamics, reading terrain, and fearless commitment to lines that looked impossible. The first 2 heats had already run. Out of 12 competitors, only 5 finished. 2 had mechanical failures. 3 gave up on obstacles. 2 rolled, both drivers fine, vehicles damaged. The fastest time so far was 52 minutes from a custom tube chassis buggy that cost $120,000 to build. Brad's run was scheduled for Heat 4, Sarah's for Heat 3. As Heat 3 lined up, Sarah climbed into her Jeep. No door, she'd removed them for weight. No roof, just a bare-bones race seat, harnesses, and a roll cage. She started the engine. The supercharged LS3 roared to life with a sound that made people turn their heads. Not loud, obnoxious exhaust, but a deep, confident rumble that spoke of serious power held in check. She buckled her 5-point harness, adjusted her helmet, and waited for the start signal. Jessica, the event coordinator, walked over. You sure about this? Sarah nodded. I didn't drive 18 hours to watch. Jessica smiled despite herself. All right, good luck. Timer starts when you cross that line. She pointed to the painted start line 20 feet ahead. Sarah eased. The Jeep forward, crossed the line, and the timer started. The first section was a rock garden, basketball to couch-sized boulders scattered across a 100-foot section with no clear path. Most drivers picked through slowly, trying to find the smoothest line. Sarah hit it at walking speed, reading terrain 3 moves ahead, placing her tires on specific rocks that provided ramp angles to lift her over the bigger obstacles. The supercharged engine's torque meant she could crawl at idle in first gear, with massive pulling power. No need to rev, no drama, just steady progress. She cleared the rock garden in 90 seconds, faster than anyone so far. The next obstacle was the staircase. 3 ledges, each progressively taller. The final one about 42 inches high. Approach it wrong and you'd high center, get stuck, or flip backward. Sarah stopped 10 feet back, studied the ledges, identified her line. She approached the first ledge at an angle to get her right front tire up first, using momentum, and suspension travel to lift the left side. Bump. First ledge cleared. Second ledge she hit more aggressively, using a compression rebound technique where you dip into a hole, then bounce out, using suspension energy to lift the tires. Bump, bounce, clear. Second ledge done. The third ledge was the problem. Most drivers took multiple attempts, needing spotters, sometimes winching. Sarah looked at it for 10 seconds, mapping her approach. She backed up 20 feet, selected a line that approached at a 30-degree angle to the ledge face and committed. She hit it with just enough speed that momentum carried the front tires up, while weight transfer and suspension compression kept the rear planted. The Jeep's front end lifted dramatically. For a moment it looked like she might flip backward, but the low center of gravity and rear weight distribution saved it. All 4 tires cleared. Total time on the staircase, 3 minutes. Previous best, 8 minutes. The spectator areas along the course were filling up. Word had spread via radio that the junk Jeep with the sleeper motor was running fast. People grabbed cameras and positioned themselves at key obstacles. Brad Hutchinson, still waiting for his heat, watched on the event's live stream monitors with growing concern. Sarah's current time was 12 minutes faster than the leading run. The next section was The Shelf, a narrow trail carved into a cliff face, maybe 6 feet wide, with a sheer rock wall on one side and a 1,000-foot drop on the other. No room for error. Most drivers crept through at walking pace, terrified. Sarah maintained steady speed, trusting her line, her tires, her nerve. The lightweight Jeep's tight wheelbase and responsive steering made it more maneuverable than the larger rigs. She cleared the shelf in 5 minutes without drama. Then came Boulder Alley, a slot canyon section filled with huge boulders that created technical climbs and descents. Here's where horsepower mattered. The climbs were steep enough that momentum mattered, but you couldn't just floor it, or you'd break traction and slide backward into rocks. Sarah used the supercharger's instant torque to maintain traction, throttle modulation so precise it looked effortless. Up one boulder, down the backside, immediately up the next. The exhaust note echoed off canyon walls, a symphony of controlled violence. Spectators watching from the rim started cheering. This wasn't just fast driving, this was mastery. Boulder Alley cleared. In 6 minutes, previous best 12. Finally, the Widowmaker, a nearly vertical rock face, maybe 80 feet tall, with minimal grip and multiple lines that looked impossible. Many competitors winched up this obstacle. Some gave up entirely. Sarah stopped at the base, got out, walked the face on foot for 3 minutes studying it, then climbed back in. She selected a line on the right side where a subtle rock feature created a natural step. She engaged low range, locked both differentials, checked her harnesses and committed. The Jeep's front tires clawed at the rock face, 640 horsepower trying to find traction. The supercharger whined under load. Rear tires spun briefly, then hooked up. The Jeep climbed 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. Sarah modulated throttle perfectly. Too much and she'd spin tires and slide backward. Too little and she'd stall. 40 feet, 50 feet. The crowd watching fell silent, everyone holding breath. 60 feet, 70 feet. The Jeep was nearly vertical, defying gravity through nothing but tire grip, power and precise driving. 80 feet. She crested the top, front tires grabbing the summit, pulling the rear up and over. The Widowmaker conquered on the first attempt without a winch. The crowd erupted. People were screaming, cheering, filming. Sarah crossed the finish line. Official time, 37 minutes, 14 seconds, a full 15 minutes faster than the previous best, a time that would stand as the course record for the next 3 years. Sarah, parked at the finish area, unbuckled, climbed out. Jessica ran over with a timer printout. That was incredible. Where did you learn to drive like that? Sarah pulled off her helmet, her hair matted with sweat. Practice. Lots of practice. I've been building and wheeling Jeeps for 20 years. The crowd surrounded her, people congratulating her, asking about the build, taking photos. Brad Hutchinson's heat was called. He climbed into his Gladiator, looking significantly less confident. His run was competent. He'd done this before, knew the obstacles, but he drove cautiously, aware that the junk Jeep had just posted a time he couldn't beat. He finished in 48 minutes. Respectable, but not close. When he parked at the finish, Sarah was there. She walked over, extended her hand. Good run. Your Gladiator's a beast. Brad shook her hand, his earlier arrogance gone. Thanks. Your Jeep. I was wrong. I judged it by how it looked. That was stupid. I'm sorry. Sarah nodded. Apology accepted. And for what it's worth, I made it look like junk on purpose. People underestimate what they think is trash. Gives me an advantage. Brad couldn't help but laugh. You set me up. Little bit. But you made it easy by being loud about it. Brad pulled out his phone, deleted his earlier mocking Instagram post, and filmed a new one. Guys, I need to apologize. Earlier I made fun of this Jeep because it looked rough. Turns out it's a 640 horsepower monster that just destroyed the course record. And the driver, absolute pro. Lesson learned, never judge a build by its paint job. Respect to Sarah Collins. Seriously. He posted it with a photo of Sarah's Jeep. The post got 200,000 views and 15,000 comments, most praising the humble admission and Sarah's build. The awards ceremony that evening presented Sarah with the expert class trophy and a check for $5,000. Jessica handed her the mic to say something. Sarah looked at the crowd of off-roaders, most of whom had spent fortunes on their builds. Thanks for this. I just want to say off-roading isn't about how much money you spend or how shiny your truck looks. It's about capability, driving skill, and respecting the terrain. You don't need a $100,000 build to have fun or be competitive. You need good engineering, proper setup, and practice. I built this Jeep over 4 years, buying parts on sale, doing all the work myself in my 2-bay garage. Total cost including the supercharger, $28,000. It looks like junk because I spent money on what matters. Drivetrain, suspension, safety, not paint. And that's fine. I'd rather have a fast, ugly Jeep than a slow, pretty one. The crowd applauded. Several people came up afterward, asking technical questions, wanting to know parts sources, tuning details, suspension setup. Sarah answered every question, shared knowledge freely, even gave out her garage's phone number for people who wanted to call with follow-ups. This was her community. She wanted to help people build better, smarter, more capable rigs. The story spread through off-road forums that night. Photos and videos of Sarah's run went viral. Not mainstream viral, but deep viral within the off-road community. The contrast between the Jeep's rough exterior and insane performance resonated. The fact that a woman had built it herself and destroyed a field of expensive builds, driven mostly by men, resonated even more. Sarah's phone started ringing with interview requests from off-road. Magazines, YouTube channels, podcast hosts. She declined most. Accepted a few from publications she respected. One interview asked why she'd intentionally made the Jeep look rough. Because I'm a mechanic, not a show builder. I care about function, not form. And honestly, I like surprising people. When you show up looking like you don't belong, people underestimate you. Then when you prove them wrong, the lesson sticks. Brad learned something today. A lot of people did. That's worth more than a paint job. The interviewer asked what she did with prize money. Donated it to a local technical school's automotive program. Kids need training, tools, opportunities. That's where the next generation of builders comes from. The off-road community loved that. Sarah became something of a folk hero, proof that skill and smart engineering beat money and ego. 3 months later, Sarah received an email from a manufacturer of off-road suspension components asking if she'd consult on product development. They'd seen her build, recognized the engineering quality, wanted her input on designing better coilovers for lightweight builds. She accepted, spent 6 months helping them develop a new product line. The company credited her in their marketing. Sales were strong. Sarah negotiated royalties on the design. The income from that consulting work funded her next project, a 1970 Ford Bronco with a twin-turbo Coyote V8. But that's another story. Brad Hutchinson stayed in touch. He'd learned humility, started focusing less on social media image and more on actual capability. He brought his Gladiator to Sarah's garage in Texas 6 months later for suspension work, a 12-hour drive, because he specifically wanted her to do the install. They became friends, occasionally competing against each other at events, mutual respect between two people who'd started on very different terms. The off-road community remembered Sarah's run for years. The Widowmaker climb became legendary. People studied video of it, debated her line choice, tried to replicate it. Most failed. Some succeeded. Everyone learned. Because that's what happens when someone proves that assumptions are dangerous, that appearance means nothing, that capability is what matters. So one final time before we close, where are you watching from and what's your version of this? What's the thing you built or did that everyone dismissed until you proved them wrong? Drop it in the comments. Because Sarah Collins proved that being underestimated is an advantage if you're confident in your capability. That looking rough doesn't mean being weak. That surprise is a weapon when people judge books by covers. Let's build a community that values substance over style together.